Right. So welcome, everybody. My name is Thomas. I'm an alumni member of SUNY BDS. And today we are hosting another international solidarity panel with some excellent organizations, those being Labor for Palestine National Network and SUNY BDS from the US, Scottish Socialist Party Students Glasgow from Scotland, Philistine İçin Minyanç from Turkey, and Student Coalition Berlin from Germany. As Israel continues its genocide against the Palestinian people and seeks to advance it further by breaking the ceasefire, the resistance on the streets needs to be met with increased resistance in the workplaces and a labor movement that can use the power that comes from production to prevent war and imperialism. Our panelists today will discuss some of the issues and their geography for Palestine organizing within their universities, and we hope to also discuss this labor aspect of the movement. As we are approaching May Day, which is International Workers' Day, they will discuss why the role of the labor movement in the context of worker-student solidarity is important for the Palestine movement, what the most important strategies and goals are that we should further now, and what the role of international solidarity is in this struggle and how it can be developed. So I'm going to introduce one speaker at a time and one organization that they belong to. They'll have some time to speak about what their organization has been doing, and then we'll move on to the next speaker and organization. So starting off first, we have Jed from SUNY BDS. SUNY BDS is an organization of undergraduate students, graduate students, faculty, and staff members from across the State University of New York system, which is abbreviated to SUNY, and it's the largest state university system in the United States. We're committed to supporting the fight for Palestinian liberation by bringing an end to SUNY's relationship with the State of Israel. Our goal is to develop a SUNY-wide boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS, movement that reaches across all 64 SUNY campuses. Jed is a student organizer who is a part of the grander collective that is working to bring an end to all genocidal relationships and partnerships with the Zionist Project. And Jed, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be in community with you guys this afternoon. But yeah, I'm a part of SUNY BDS, and I'm also a student at UAlbany. And we are really pushing for divestment and then trying to build a student movement on the local level as well as between the SUNY system and every student organization that exists within it. As we know, the U.S. has accelerated its attacks on an internal front. But although we recognize that the Trump administration has shown itself to be a blatant depiction of fascism in the U.S., we understand these attempts of repression and attack and erasure for those who stand up against it is not unique. It's not a unique evil. Every unchecked action of this current administration has taken administration has taken has been paved by its previous administration and the oligarchy that is the U.S. And what we're now facing in the belly of the beast is a result of the imperial core's allegiance to the demands of oligarchy and colonialism. We remember the murder of Wadia al-Fayoum, the 6-year-old Palestinian American boy who was murdered in his own home in Illinois. We remember the 3-year-old Palestinian American girl who was submerged in water in Texas. There's no denying that the state of the U.S. and those in power have continued to normalize anti-Palestinian hatred and laid the groundwork for this shifting phase of fascism. And for the past 17 months or 18 months now of continued genocide, students from across the U.S. have been brutally attacked by the university police. Administrators are collaborating with the police and suspending and expelling and revoking degrees from pro-Palestinian students and advocacy. And surveillance has been on an all-time high. And this all has reaffirmed the Zion American, our university's commitment to the Zion American war machine. The current state of the university movement follows the chant, every student fighting for liberation for the world, like what they say, which is the more they try to silence us, the louder we will be. And we will continue to broaden our movement to make fighting for the liberation of people inescapable. We also understand that universities are a microcosm of the state's interests, and they play a big role in upholding American imperialism. The Zion American Project and those who aid and abet it, like university admin and board of trustees members, see students as a threat to colonial structures. And in this act of challenging our institutions, we also have heighten the contradiction that students or universities are places that advocate for academic freedom, freedom of speech, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's important to remember why students have made their campuses a site of struggle. There are no universities left in our schools are materially invested in this scholasticide, and even more devastatingly, the continued genocide of the Palestinian people. So students are halting the gears of university functions that normalize massacre and strengthening their movements as a direct result of their repression. So we know that repression breeds resistance, and I think that's something that we are currently seeing unfold. The students have not stopped. And also, we've seen in this new administration attacks on the Department of Education and talks about creating a non-political alternative university system. And we know that the education system in the US has always been bent against the will of the people and existed in connection with empire, from teaching false histories of indigenous people to liberalizing the image of Martin Luther King Jr. for their own interests. We as students know that knowledge is always political and history is always political, and the classroom will continue to be a political ground. And this new fascist administration has threatened and attempted to dismantle the Department of Education in hopes to create docile and compliant citizens. The education system in the U.S. wants to build, like the education system the U.S. wants to build is one that will make less defiant scholars that will also bend to empire. But we know the students who are for the people of the world will not bend to empire, will bend against it. To this, we say that this kind of structure, the structure that has already existed in the U.S. For education, has always been in motion. It has always never served us. And as we witness, like Columbia University and the attacks that are happening across universities in the U.S., the Trump administration doesn't need to shift anything in order for our universities to act in compliance to it, because these universities are already signed into collaborating with empires of genocide and creating more authoritarian environments within their institutions. If it seems like our institutions are caving into fascism, it must be made clear that they are only exposing what we have already known to be true about them. There are no limits to the lengths of the Trump administration or our universities that they will go, because they have always operated in this way. It's just been heightened. But again, with heightened repression comes heightened resistance. And so we will continue to adapt our conditions and diversify our tactics to achieve halting the Zionist American war machine. And we have complete faith in the military operations of the axis of resistance and reaffirm our commitment to striking the empire from within the entities that bear responsibility for this continued destabilization and genocide in the Southwest Asian and North African area. And in the words of Ghassan Kanafani, wherever you strike it, which is imperialism, you damage it and you serve the people of the world. And some current problems that, or like conflicts that I've been seeing on my front at least, or like the UAlbany front, is that a lot of students are hesitant to show up in different ways, but that's why it is important to create a diversity of tactics, and people can find where they can fit and continue to advocate and put pressure. In UAlbany, we just passed an ethical investment policy on the student senate floor, almost unanimously, with one person voting against it. And these policies have been adopted, I believe, on a student level by multiple universities, including Georgetown University, Yale, Wesleyan University, and ETC. But we're trying to put pressure on our administrators by showing that university communities have an interest in ensuring that financial resources do not support industries or companies that are complicit in genocide. And we also know that beyond transparency and accountability from these in the university financial decisions, we are hoping that this is an avenue for divestment for our campaign. Our school specifically has currently one spot for student involvement when it comes to looking over like finances and what the university foundation is invested in. And it creates extremely limited avenues for student involvement, making it difficult for students to input the resources, to have input on the resources designed to assist students. And if this has been passed on our student senate level, but if it's passed on the university senate level, they will be able to formally urge institution and the foundation that it has to adopt an ethical investment policy to ensure that our university funds are not invested in companies, organizations, or entities that are complicit in or directly enable state violence and war. And yeah, we're crafting this now, but we also understand that the most important strategies is understanding that even when we push for this on our schools, we must agitate beyond this one strategy or this one avenue. Building coalition, I find, has been very important, and broadening our connections with other people and seeing where we all have to fight is important. And also building up bravery again among students. And beyond workers, which I'm very interested to hear from the other panelists about labor unions and what that role is in this movement, because it's all intertwined. But to understand building bravery and understanding that we must halt the gears of imperialism in tangible ways is essential. And we know the routes that we have taken thus far haven't even scratched the surface in halting these gears. And we know people are being disappeared simply for writing op-eds, like Ramisa Ozturk, and the students who took this route of negotiating in the right ways are still being disappeared, like Mahmoud Khalil. And they've been sent to detention centers and have been chased down by ICE. And we know that our institutions are collaborating with these entities to disappear us. Higher institutions are expelling student workers, and they're firing union presidents just days before they started bargaining. So we know our power is very essential, and there's a lot to be learned with the history of Palestinian workers agitating their agitating their entities in the ways they can. I think we can learn from that in the U.S. But yeah, it's key to our struggle here for liberation, and I think that's all I have. But I'm very excited to be in community with you guys and learn. And yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Jed. Very great contextualizing of the situation here in the United States and the strategy and current actions of SUNY BDS. So thank you very much for that. Next up, we have Labor for Palestine National Network. Zelda will be speaking on their behalf. And Labor for Palestine National Network was launched in April of 2004 by New York City Labor Against the War and Al Auda, New York, the Palestine Right to Return Coalition, to reclaim the legacy of working class solidarity with Palestine in the United States, as reflected in groundbreaking statements by the League of Revolutionary Black Workers in 1969 and wildcat strikes against the United Auto Workers leadership's support for Israel in 1973. LFP endorses the 2005 Palestinian-led Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions picket line, which demands an end to occupation and apartheid, full equality for all, and Palestinian refugees' right to return to the homes and lands from which they were expelled. This includes support for calls from Palestinian trade unions, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, and other trade unionists around the world to refuse to handle Israeli cargo, and calling on labor bodies to divest from Israel bonds and cut ties with the Histadrut, Israel's racist labor federation. Zelda is a labor organizer with No Tech for Apartheid, a member of Labor for Palestine National Network and New York City Labor for Palestine, as well as a digital humanities student at CUNY Graduate Center, devoted to developing tech built by, for, and alongside the public.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So yeah, my name is Zelda. I'm with Labor for Palestine, but I also do a lot of my within labor work with Google workers with No Tech for Apartheid. So we, with Labor for Palestine, do a lot of coalition building across various different types of labor formations. And I want to emphasize that it's different kinds of labor formations, not necessarily labor unions, just because, for example, No Tech for Apartheid is not a union, but we are workers that are kind of operating a little bit outside of like a traditional union structure, just because in tech we face a lot of anti-union sentiment, and therefore there has to be some sort of organizing that's happening, even if it's not like necessarily recognized by the company, and there has to be some sort of collective action happening there as well. But with Labor for Palestine, we we know that it's way too common for many unions to either actively work against the rank and file, especially when it comes to organizing around Palestine, and it's a very unfortunate thing. But what Labor for Palestine National Network always has upheld is that the rank and file are the key to stopping the imperial war machine. And if we build among each other, that is what will create long-term change and prepare us for mass labor action. A lot of the time, what we notice is that we're having a lot of similar struggles across different sectors and unions, and it's super important for us to come together and realize what kinds of tactics are being used against us and how some of us have already been encountering them and fighting against them, learning from each other, and building a greater labor struggle, united labor struggle. With No Tech for Apartheid, a lot of like our specific inspiration behind like the work that we do is the Polaroid Revolutionary Workers Movement, which was involved in getting workers who worked at Polaroid to stop to engage in direct action against as workers against Polaroid for their role in South African apartheid. And I think it's a very rich piece of tech aligned union labor history that we don't really hear much about. And specifically for No Tech for Apartheid, a year ago, almost a year ago, on April 16th, I was part of the sit-in that happened at Google New York City, as well as Google in California, where 9 of us, including I, were arrested during a sit-in because we refused to leave until they dropped the contract, and well, they just took me out in cuffs. But I think that a lot of people have asked me like if it felt like it was worth it if we like achieved our goals. And I think that the whole thing about engaging in labor struggle is that like you are engaged in a struggle that's much bigger than just you, and it's not necessarily about what you are seeing in the specific moment or in a year after, but it's about the legacy and the history of labor resistance that you are a part of. And it is all of our responsibilities to engage in that. Of course, there's like a lot of fear that we're facing, especially within labor. We're seeing a lot of worsening labor conditions. I think that prior there was just already working conditions that were really bad, but now there's also a concern for personal living conditions as alongside these labor conditions, with the Trump administration carrying out increased repression and deportations of people. And of course, like as much as there is fear, there also needs to be something said about what is required to sacrifice for the purposes of liberation. And I think that was something that I contended with a lot going into the sit-in. I didn't necessarily expect to lose my job. I should have known that the big bad genocide place for TAFs would just do anything in their power to get rid of me. But I think that it wasn't necessarily the outcome that I had expected, but it was one that I knew was ultimately a very small sacrifice in the scale of everything happening in Palestine with the genocide, that losing my job and still being able to like, because I had worked in tech, recognizing my class privilege for that, to be able to not worrying for an extended period of time about like paying rent or paying for groceries means that like in tech we are also like specifically positioned to be able to take these kinds of risks that other people in the labor movement are not, and simultaneously are working on products that are touching much bigger parts of the world than the average worker and laborer is. And I think it's a huge task and undertaking to try to have Google workers understand the scale of their work. I think that having been there, I understand very intricately how siloed all of the different teams at Google are. And so you think that you're working on this tiny little thing over here, and you're not really told about like what that bigger picture might be and how that might be misused. And how the things that you think might not have an impact here will eventually come back to us with the imperial boomerang. And we're seeing that a lot happening with the technology that's used to surveil Palestinians now being used to surveil people here, undocumented immigrants here, people at the border. We're seeing that Google just announced contracts with Lockheed Martin and the Customs and Border Protection as well. And we're seeing this intensification of the militarization of tech because they're, when you normalize it in Palestine, it will come back here. And that's something that like we try to talk a lot about with workers and engaging in base building. And that's kind of like the only thing that we really can do in the context of everything that's happening is continuing to talk to workers, continuing to ask questions. And I think I recently came across Pedagogy of the Oppressed, highly recommend for anyone to read. It's like an amazing reading, and I think talks a lot about how do we engage people in struggle. And you can't just tell people that you are oppressed. You have to have people understand that they are oppressed, and how they understand it is by connecting their lived experiences with the things that we know. That is not something that you can just hand to people and say you are oppressed, but you have the knowledge of your own oppression. How can we help unlock that for you to understand that even if you work in tech, and they might try to pay you all this money to work at Google, for example, what strings are attached with that, and how you're still exploited if you're accidentally creating tech for genocide and without your consent. I think that's a very exploitative practice that you don't even realize that what you're doing is contributing to this much bigger problem. For example, we're seeing a lot of this like AI stuff come out, and I know that a lot of workers might be like, I don't work on Google Cloud. Google Cloud seems to be having all the problems, but I work like over here in like YouTube or something. But the company did send out emails asking every employee to train their AI models. That was like a huge focus for years at that company, to say, we need help with like making our Gemini better, with making our generative AI better. Please spend a significant amount of time while you are working to do this too, even if it's not directly related to your work, or find ways to bring AI into your existing teams, even if it doesn't necessarily fit, just so we can continue to use it and learn from it and train it. So whether or not you want to recognize that like your work is contributing to that, maybe not the work that you're coding, but the work that you're helping to train. And as users who use Google's products, we're also helping to do that. Anytime you do the image recognition for like verification purposes, they're training, you're helping them identify a school bus. Like I think about how that could be misused in a multitude of different ways. And so it's really important to have people understand these things and not necessarily to engage in shame as a tactic. I think that we're not going to get free by shaming people into engaging in labor action. We need people to understand that there's a responsibility and to address that fear by saying, we are doing this together. You're not doing this alone. And there is fear when we're acting alone, but there are lots of people who feel this way. And you will find that out if you engage in true, honest conversations with different people and build that trust. And it doesn't happen overnight. And I think it's very different than a lot of the mobilizing we're seeing for Palestine. This is the long game, and the long game takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes bringing the fight to the workplace, which is where it's the scariest to bring it to. I think that I have noticed a lot of like mobilizing and protests, and I think that the protests serve a very different purpose of like helping unite people and bring that energy, which I think that sometimes when you feel like you can't find people who are aligned with you, a protest is really helpful for that collective feeling. And it's about bringing that collective feeling. Where can I create that somewhere else? Where can I create that in my workplace? Where can I create this sort of like sense of the people around me are aligned on the same thing? And how can I help engage them in struggle? Again, you can't tell people what to do. I don't tell people go do a sit-in. I tell people whatever it is that you do, but take ownership over it and let that feeling guide you. Let that vision guide you of what a better world could look like. And in the context of labor, there's so much that we can learn from international unions who have much more militant, responses to stuff that are happening in their respective parts of the world. And I think that it's so important for us to be able to connect with different labor formations outside of the United States, which are facing also lots of different kinds of repression also disappearances and violence. And there's a lot of different tactics that we can learn from people who have already done it. We're not reinventing the wheel here. And that's where international solidarity is incredibly important, for us to learn from other people's experiences, for us to inform our own. Because again, we are all part of a very rich collective labor history. And I think a lot specifically with regards to Google, how they get to operate in all these different countries and supersede nation state. But for some reason, our labor organizing has to be here in the US and like there in the UK. And Google has accumulated labor across a bunch of different countries, and we shouldn't limit ourselves to just like organizing within our tech union of Google in the UK and our tech union of Google in the US, but to have those rank and file labor power movements growing, and if anything, like making use of their technology that already connects us, but using it for our own purposes. We already know who those people are. We already know where they're located. We already know what teams they're on. And instead of just like letting it stay within Google's power of how we organize there, to use that to our advantage. I think it's also really important to note that there's a very rich labor history with worker student solidarity as well. I think a really awesome example of this is the Center for Popular Education from the People's Revolutionary Government of Grenada. And in recognizing every student was a worker, and every worker is also a student. This is it's one of my favorite sayings. Every student is a worker, and every worker is a student. And our struggles are very much interconnected. And it's something that I can sense here in the US, especially being in New York, seeing what's happening at Columbia University like unfold before my eyes has been, I'm seeing the students struggle, and I'm trying to see labor struggle alongside them, so that it's not just the students at risk. And it takes a lot of conversations with these professors that that are in a very different place. And it's also a lot of different labor designations, right? So I actually work at Barnard as which is the sister college of Columbia. And where I work at Barnard, I am part-time staff, and then my boss is full-time staff. And then the faculty that we work with, some of them are tenured faculty, and some of them are non-tenured faculty, and some of them are adjunct faculty. And all of these different labor designations that they create is to divide us, and we need to find ways to connect amidst those designations, because the faculty can't teach without their TAs, and the TAs can't teach without their student workers who also help, and they can't teach without the faculty, without the staff at the libraries who help run everything. And none of us can do any of that without the janitorial staff, like keeping everything clean. There are a multitude of different labor approaches that we can take of standing in solidarity with each other. And what I would love to see is for more labor and students to not just try to connect with professors as labor, but to connect with all the different kinds of staff that exist, because they're not the only ones, and they can't do their work. Faculty can't do their work without all of these other designations of labor that also exist, that make everything possible. And so I think the most important thing for us to keep in mind is that we have to be having uncomfortable conversations with people, and we need to be base building. We need to be building that power, understanding where that power exists. It's not just about saying and talking with the people who already agree with you, because we're not going to get free by not going out of our way to talk to the people that we need to convince that this is the vision and the goal that all of us should be having. None of our labor should ever be used for something like a genocide. And I would love to see that in reclaiming our labor to resist the genocide, we cannot just like reclaim it, but redirect it and build things in a much different way. And for me, that's part of what I do as a grad student, is I'm trying to think about how we can teach labor tech differently, so that people can build tech. I think that there shouldn't be this like select class of like elite tech bros that are the ones who build everything, and for them to build everything so unprincipled and so unvalued without the values embedded. We have the values, we should also be building the stuff. And I think a huge part of that is is trying to teach technology differently so that people don't feel like, oh, well, I care about the humanities, and so the humanities is like the route I'm going to go in. Our world is increasingly more and more digital and tech-based, and we need to find ways to bridge these things together so that we can build things that are for us and not, I think Google says they build for everyone, but they want everyone so that they can accumulate more mass amounts of wealth, because that's what they're here to do. And I think that if we are able to build for our respective communities, I don't think that we necessarily have to build for the entire world. I think also when we start thinking about building for the entire world, that's a pretty colonial mindset of trying to create one thing for everything. But I would love to see local tech labor in New York City focus on local tech that we can build for New York City. And of course, we can talk with local tech in the UK and what they need and what they're doing in London. But what the solutions that we need for things in New York are going to look very different than the solutions for London. And we can learn from each other, but I don't think it has to be one solution fits all. But anyways, that's all I have for today. I'm excited to talk more and answer any questions. Thank you.
Those were incredibly insightful comments there, Zelda. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience and your knowledge with us today. So next up, we have the Socialist Party Students Glasgow, whom Jamie O'Rourke will be representing. So the Scottish Socialist Party is Scotland's socialist political party, uniting those on the far left across Scotland to fight for change. The SSP has stood with Palestine since its foundation over 25 years ago and has made the genocide its key political issue since October of 2023. SSP Students Glasgow is its students' wing at Glasgow University. Jamie is a member of the SSP Executive Committee and is president of SSP Students Glasgow. He was one of the organizers of the successful Gassan for Rector campaign last year. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thanks so much, Tom, and thanks to everyone who's joined us tonight or today, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. So, as Tom was saying there, I'm Jamie, and I'm the president of Scottish Socialist Party Students Glasgow. So I just wanted to give you a wee bit of context in my time here tonight of what's sort of going on the UK front, because I know that a lot of comrades here are from America and Germany and other places. So at Glasgow University, there's been a campaign since October 2023 to get the university to divest from weapons companies. So as it stands, University of Glasgow currently invests £6.8 million in the arms trade, and has regular collaborations with arms manufacturers through career fairs, apprenticeships, freshers' weeks, programs to funnel students directly from education to the manufacturing of weapons that have been used, obviously, to commit atrocities across the world, particularly in the Middle East. Now, the university management is very much pro-Zionist, pro-Israel. They've made no secret of that over the past 18 months or so. But we're very lucky at Glasgow, and this is something that a lot of other universities don't have to quite the same level, that we've got a great deal of student staff solidarity, and we've got an incredibly strong teaching trade union there, and some incredibly strong and increasingly more interlinked with the student movement. Other trade unions in terms of admin, janitorial staff, workers from across the university. Now, we have sort of built those connections before the Palestine campaign started in 2023. The Student Solidarity Committee at Glasgow University has been very, very active in supporting its staff, teaching staff and otherwise, at picket lines and other sort of staff demonstrations. We've built those relationships up. We've spoken to people, as Zelda was saying. The most important thing you can do is talk to people on your campuses and your workplace, and talk to them about Palestine, talk to them about labour rights, trade union rights, because these things are interlinked, as we know, they're not separate. And that sort of came to the fore, that student staff solidarity, during the rector elections, which Tom sort of alluded to there, where we had a turnout, increased turnout from the previous elections. Basically, the way it works is the students elect a public figure, a celebrity, someone who they would regard as aspirational to the position of rector, and they get a say on the university board. And this is a thing across most of the old universities in Scotland. campaign for Dr. Ghassan Abu Sittah, who was a Palestinian surgeon, humanitarian, Marxist, great sort of thinker, great humanitarian, and that campaign was a roaring success. He received over 8% of the vote on increased turnout, and sent a very, very clear message to the management that students were for divestment. And it's the hard ground campaign and actually getting out and speaking to people, having these conversations that not only won Ghassan that sort of victory, and it won the student movement, the Palestine movement that victory, but actually won him an absolute historic, overwhelming majority in what was to begin with, quite a contentious race. And it's that kind of tactic that particularly the SFP, but also other pro-Palestine left-wing groups in Scotland have been using, of getting onto the street and speaking to people, convincing people, that has seen us win so many victories, particularly recently, and in the face of the genocide in Palestine. So this sort of student staff solidarity was renewed even further with the renewal of Israel's assaults on Palestine earlier this year. The students occupied and took over one of the buildings on campus, which they renamed from the Sir Charles Wilson building to the Daramad Manasara building. Several students went on hunger strike, occupied that building for a week, and an encampment was set up around the university, again to send a very clear message to management, who responded in a typically sort of Quisling fashion with an email warning students not to use Arabic in a threatening way on campus. So blatant racism and anti-Arab hate from university management, but that was nothing new. This did push the Student Representatives Committee, which was one of the 4 student trade unions on campus, and by far the biggest one, is the one that you're automatically signed up to if you're a student at Glasgow University, and also the one that's most interlinked with the sort of management process. So it's difficult to push any kind of political motion through with them. But we did manage to pressurise a vote on divestment from them, and the result there was double the turnout that turned out in the rector election, which gives you an idea of how much more the issue of Palestine continues to sort of grow and continues to bloom in people's consciousness. And the result was, again, even more pro-Palestine, with an 89.3% vote for divestment from the students. So just absolutely incredible. And during the campaign, it was made absolutely clear the no side took a very sort of pro-NATO position and made the argument that to stand with Ukraine, you have to vote no and continue to invest in weapons. The yes side totally rejected that framing and said that it was an issue of Palestine solidarity and ending the university's complicity in genocide. And I think the students probably spoke for themselves for that result. 89.3% really isn't anything to be scoffed at. So again, that student staff solidarity was a huge part of that. And while that was a student referendum, the staff made regular appearances at the encampment, sent messages of solidarity. The Jewish Staff Network released a fantastic statement unconditionally supporting the students and condemning the university management for anti-Arab racism, and their warning to students about using Arabic on campus in a threatening way, whatever that means. And a vast majority of the societies at the university come out to, again, support the student encampment, support the hunger strikers, support the campaign. It's everything from the LGBTQ society, the Muslim society, to the cheese society and the beer society. We're on side with this. So it was a huge majority of students supporting the campaign. Staff and students have been involved with the Show Israeli Genocide the Red Card campaign, which is a Scotland-wide coalition of workers and students aimed at boycotting Israel from the sporting field. So trying to encourage Scotland to keep Israeli athletes out of sporting events for for the duration of the genocide and sort of cultural boycott Israel on every front. And they've had quite a good deal of success on that. And that's beyond just Glasgow, that's universities and workplaces across the country. So as a sort of broader context, just to sort of wrap up, the UK at the moment is under the rule of a historically unpopular Labour government. The Labour Party historically has been the party of the mainstream left, sort of centre left, by no means radical, by no means socialist. It's the periods in its history when it's been more socialist than other times. At the moment, we've got one of the most right-wing Labour governments that we've ever had, just totally unapologetically pro-Israel. They've recently cut benefits for the sick and disabled, plunging 250,000 people in the UK into poverty, including 50,000 kids, all the while increasing military spending and continuing to provide support for Israel on military and intelligence fronts through flights from the RAF to gather intel on Gaza, and a provision of warplanes which have been used to kill kids regularly in Palestine. And to give you an idea of the sort of makeup of that government, the previous Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, who was one of the more sort of socialist Labour leaders we've had, certainly in my lifetime, asked a question about the Labour government's continued support of Israel in the context of these massive cuts to benefits that's going to plunge people into poverty and will kill hundreds of disabled people. I mean, there's no dance around that. And the response from the Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, was that the Labour Party should be proud to be unashamedly pro-military. It played an important part in the founding of NATO, and it should be unashamedly pro-NATO. No mention of the cuts, but more military jargon from an incredibly right-wing Labour regime about NATO and about warmongering, preparing for war, and fuck the rest, you know. So, just to sort of tie up, I think it's really important that what we take away from tonight is just this idea of building links between students and workers. That's workers in universities, workers out with universities. Zelda talked quite rightly about tech workers who are going to play a massive part in any Palestine action that has taken place over the last 18 months and will continue to take place. I think that this idea of linking Palestine and the struggle of Palestine to May Day is incredibly important. We had an SSP stall just today where someone came up to us and made this point and said that it's so important that we link Palestine with workers' rights and with the workers' struggle. And as socialists, certainly speaking, I'm sure all of us here are socialists, but that's something that we need to do. And I think it's important to draw that link again about imperialism, about who benefits from imperialism, about whose interests are served when we continue to give money to arms companies and use those arms in the most inhumane ways across the world. So I think drawing those links, having these conversations, that's what we really need to take away for this. And I'm incredibly happy to see so many of you sort of join tonight so we can have these conversations and continue to draw those links. So thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Jamie. It's really heartening to see the successes that are already occurring in Scotland with regards to worker-student solidarity and general growing support in Scotland for the Palestinian liberation and for basic human rights and dignity around the world. So next up, we have Philistine Ichin Minyanch, who has an English translation of 1,000 Youth for Palestine and is abbreviated to FIBG, which is a youth movement based in Turkey that aims to reveal the deep ties, commercial and political partnerships of the Turkish government with the Zionist entity and to isolate the Zionist entity by severing these ties, aiming to cut all commercial, academic, and political relations. And the speaker for FIBG is Sena Eri, who is a member thereof, who organizes protests and campaigns with her comrades in solidarity with the global intifada. So Sena, thank you so much for being on the panel today.
Thank you, Thomas. Sorry, because of the gas, my lungs are still a bit bad. So, um, so we are a youth movement, youth-led movement that emerged in late 2023 in response to the ongoing genocide in Gaza and the global silence around it, and especially the silence in our country, Turkey. We started organizing because we saw that existing response in Turkey were either too aligned with the state or too afraid to speak clearly. While the Turkish government condemned Israel publicly, it remained its military, economic, and diplomatic ties. So we couldn't stand by and watch this double standard go unchallenged. So we wanted to challenge both people's views of the government and the government itself. Our aim is to build a political movement grounded in anti-imperialism, anti-Zionism, and anti-capitalism. For us, the Palestinian struggle is not a humanitarian issue, it's a political one. And it's not just about ending the siege, it's about dismantling the systems that sustain it. So our work focuses on revealing and disrupting complicity. We've blocked parts and to interrupt the flow of goods and from Israel. We've exposed trade routes and logistic companies profiting from the war. And we've launched boycott campaigns and pressured institutions to cut off ties. And we already taken these demands into the streets and into the government-sponsored rallies to show that resistance must go beyond symbolic gestures. We must take actions. But we are also very clear that Palestine cannot be separated from the broader struggles happening in Turkey today and globally. Right now, we are witnessing a wave of labor unrest, strike, walkouts, and resistance in the face of rising cost of living, worsening working conditions, and against the dictatorship of Erdogan regime. And at the same time, people are taking to the streets to protest censorship, poverty, and repression. These movements aren't disconnected from Palestine. They are the same enemy. They share the same enemy. A global system that prioritizes profit and control over human rights, human life. That's why one of our goals is to bridge these struggles to bring students and workers into common spaces of action. We are working to make the Palestinian cause not a separate issue, but a unifying thread across all social movements. Whether it's port workers refusing to handle Israeli goods or students demanding their universities cut ties with weapons manufacturers. This is how we build lasting power, we believe. Intentionally, so around the world, we are building with organizers from around the world, in the US and in Cuba, in Lebanon, around the globe. So the student movement, especially in the US, is reclaiming campuses, demanding divestment, and refusing to normalize genocide. These actions give us hope, and they remind us that resistance is global and it crosses borders, and so must our organizing. So what we are doing is not a one-time campaign. We are building a generation, and we are building lasting networks that let's say understand the systems we're up against, and that are willing to fight them collectively. Because we don't want a ceasefire. We want an end to apartheid, occupation, and colonial violence. We want a free Palestine, and alongside a liberated future for all people resisting exploitation, and repression in Turkey and beyond. Yeah, so that's how I can explain our goals and what we do. So thank you all for bringing together this panel and giving us space to talk about these. And it's really helpful to see us together here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Senna. It's amazing to hear how thoughtful the movement in Turkey is with regards to how all of our oppressions are interconnected. I'm reminded a lot of what Zelda was sharing about recognizing that the realities we live in already give us a clue to these intersecting oppressions, and it's just letting people be aware of that. And of course, that also is very relevant for an international solidarity panel, because obviously our issues are not just relegated to our individual countries. So thank you so much for giving us that perspective. Our next speaker tonight, or today, depending again on where you are in the world, is Andrew Hastings from the Student Coalition Berlin, abbreviated to SCP. So SCP is an anti-colonial coalition of 10 plus student collectives upholding the liberation of Palestine as a political compass for collective justice and liberation. SCP demands a stop to the genocide in Palestine, a full boycott of Israel academically and culturally, protection of academic freedom, an end to student repression, and a recognition of Germany's colonial legacy. Andrew is a member of SCP, working primarily in the Hertie Schools Solidarity Collective. He organizes campus discussions, advocates for direct action, and is a student journalist. Andrew, thank you so much for speaking today.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful hearing everyone's perspectives and experiences. I'm Andrew. I'm a master's student of human rights and global governance at the Hertie School in Berlin. Today I'm speaking as a member of the SCB, as a member of Hertie School's Solidarity Collective. So SCB is a network of students organizing across Berlin's universities to demand justice for Palestine, to resist the repression of our political expression, and to build lasting solidarity in Germany. I want to start by recognizing that we stand in solidarity not only with students around the world, but specifically with Palestinians, especially those on the front lines in the fight against US-led imperialism, who struggle every day in opposition to Israel's apartheid and genocide. Solidarity means that we recognize our struggle as the same, and we must fight imperialism and dismantle the capitalist systems which perpetuate it, which is a difficult task as the genocidal Rubicon has been crossed and authoritarianism continues to spread. So in this specific moment, the student movement is articulated against fascists in Germany, Europe, and the United States, as well as across the world. Let's be clear, the real terrorists are sitting comfortably in their offices and their ivory towers as they sell arms to Israel and wage war on humanity and snatch students off the streets. The repression we face today as students exposes the machinery of Western imperialism. It's about the limits being placed on dissent, on anti-colonial solidarity, and our capacity to imagine and fight for a just world. The attack on Palestine's existence concerns all of us, and we all have a responsibility to resist. One of the most pressing concerns facing our movement is the deep entanglement of universities with institutions complicit in the occupation of Palestine. In Berlin, we have protested ongoing partnerships with the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, amongst others, an institution partially built on occupied Palestinian land in East Jerusalem, in direct violation of international law. More than symbolic, Hebrew University has active ties to the Talipot program, an elite Israeli military academic initiative. These collaborations effectively whitewash militarized research and normalize occupation under the guise of academic exchange. Our demands are simple: cut ties and end complicity, and yet every call for boycott, divestment, or even basic accountability is met with institutional silence or worse, outright retaliation. The BDS movement, endorsed by Palestinian civil society and supported by countless academics, artists, and human rights defenders globally, is increasingly criminalized in Germany, as recent Bundestag resolutions have smeared it as anti-Semitic. This move has chilled open debate and leaves student groups like ours vulnerable to legal harassment and media demonization. We continue to insist that boycotts are a nonviolent and legitimate form of political pressure. That stance is increasingly radicalized in Germany, not because it's extreme, but because we are supposed to say, because we are not supposed to say what is plainly true, which is that complicity in apartheid and genocide is unacceptable. Central to this repression, more recently, is the uncritical adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which is a vague and politicized framework that conflates criticism of Israeli policy with the hatred of Jewish people. This definition has been adopted by institutions across Germany and is now being used to shut down our events, smear our movement, and criminalize our solidarity. Let's be clear. We stand firmly against all anti-Semitism in all its forms. Our movement includes Jewish students. Our struggle is anti-colonial, anti-racist, and anti-fascist. The IHRA definition, with its imprecise language and illustrative examples, has been widely criticized by scholars, legal experts, and human rights advocates for undermining academic freedom, critical inquiry, and limiting the diversity of Jewish identity. By conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, the IHRA definition is part of a larger trend to weaponize anti-Semitism against vital discussions pertaining to international law, human rights, and Middle Eastern politics. It deprives students and scholars of the freedom to address these global issues critically. Even more, it puts students at risk of danger, as we've seen most evidently in recent deportations across the US and here in Berlin. The repression is very real and it's escalating. Just days ago, Berlin authorities began deporting international students, including EU citizens who participated in peaceful pro-Palestinian actions. Their residency permits have been terminated. This is a clear example of weaponizing migration law, and it expresses a broader danger in Germany of the widening scope of Germany's Staatsräson, which is the reason of state, which claims Israel's security as its own security. The students were basically accused of anti-Semitism and supporting terrorism, and none of them have been convicted of any crimes. But under German migration law, authorities don't need a criminal conviction to issue a deportation order, and we are now seeing the expulsion of international students for their basic political beliefs. Others are facing threats of exmatriculation at their schools for allegedly violating university codes of conduct through protest. Police routinely raid student-led teach-ins and solidarity encampments. Last year at Humboldt University, over 150 students were violently evicted by police for a sit-in. We've seen kettling, intimidation, surveillance, and brutality. Most recently, at the 8th of March demonstration for International Women's Day, the student bloc was violently attacked and pepper sprayed by Berlin police for a peaceful demonstration. Make no mistake, these tactics are designed to isolate us, to fragment us, and to convince us that speaking out will cost us our futures. To me, it is clear if we are to endure, if we are to grow, we must build coalitions beyond the university. And that means reconnecting with the labor movement, as we've been talking about a bit today, and not out of some labor movement nostalgia, but out of necessity for shutting down the machinery of capitalist imperialism. Workers in Berlin face growing precarity. Palestinian workers, migrant workers, often the same people targeted by this state violence, are among the most vulnerable. And if students and workers can unite to demand that institutions stop investing in apartheid, to demand job security, housing, dignity for all, then we become a threat not just to university boards, but to the status quo in general. This will be challenging. The German labor movement has often remained cautious, especially understandably given its country's historical wounds and the pressure placed on unions to remain neutral. But neutrality in the face of apartheid is not neutrality, it's abandonment. So we are not asking for special treatment. We are demanding the right to protest, the right to speak, the right to stand in solidarity, and we are doing so. And we are doing so in the face of media campaigns, criminalization, and an academic culture more invested in public image than truth. The student movement for Palestine in Berlin is not going away. We're growing, we're learning, and we're organizing in multiracial, multi-faith, multilingual coalitions. So we're building connections, and we're imagining liberation beyond the walls of a university, and we will not stop until justice is realized from Berlin to Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for giving us that context coming from Berlin, and for pointing out the growing connections that the student coalition is having with the labor movement and groups and demographics beyond for Palestinian liberation and anti-apartheid activism. So that is everything that our panelists have prepared to share. We'll now move into the Q&A portion of the panel.